Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, once again to the Jets Group Chat podcast. I am your host, Matt Cardos, joined by my esteemed co-host, handsome Jerry Spiga. How are we doing tonight, Jerry?
Not bad, not bad. How about yourself, Cardos?
Doing well, can't complain. Very special guest joining us tonight. We have Mr. Rich Cimini, the Jets beat writer for ESPN, a longtime beat writer, now over 3 decades on the beat. We both have admired Rich's work for a long time. He's as good as it gets there on the beat. So, Rich, we appreciate you hopping on for a few minutes just to kind of give us some insight on everything Gang Green.
I'll do what I can. I appreciate the very kind introduction. It's good to be with you guys. It's always good to talk Jets, even when there's really nothing going on too much. even during our summer vacation, it's always good to talk Jets.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Rich, because this is kind of like that calm before the storm period, 5 or so weeks before the mandatory reporting for training camp. Do you kind of treat this period like the players? Do you kind of kick back, relax, and kind of recharge, knowing that for the next 6-7 months you're going to be full bore at it?
Kind of, until Tay Hayes got arrested, and then my Sunday got interrupted a little bit yesterday. Not too much of an interruption, and then again today when they released him. So technically, I'm not on vacation yet. I will be very shortly. In the next couple of days, I'll be on vacation. And yes, you definitely want to kick back for a while, because it is a long run, from July 23rd all the way until, who knows when, in January. So, or maybe February, who knows? So sure. It is a long run. It's a long off season. And so much like the coaches and the executives and the players, we try to kick back a little bit too.
Awesome. Do you find yourself having a hard time, as a guy that is so connected in and covers the team as closely as you have for as long as you have, kind of disconnecting from that and just like putting your phone away and not staying on top of things when you're trying to get that very limited vacation time?
That's a good question, but I used to have trouble disconnecting. I don't have any problem now. I mean, I am ready to just kick. We go away for a little bit. It's a great time for our family to get together. And I really try not to look at my phone that much when I'm away, or even when I'm home, just hanging around the house doing a staycation. I try to really disconnect. And my office is really good. They know when each writer is off and when to not bother them and when to bother them. So if something were to happen when I was away, I don't think they would bother me unless it was like some major news.
Sure. Well, that's good. Speaking of disconnected, obviously the main storyline coming out of the mandatory OTA was the not appearance of Haason Reddick and that whole situation. And it seems like it's been pretty well documented that the Jets were kind of taken off guard by the whole thing and kind of felt like they had kind of like a bait and switch on them.
Right.
How do you kind of see that playing out? And what is the happy medium with 5 weeks now till camp? How do you see this situation playing out?
Matt, it's a great question, and it's a very interesting situation. And of all the years I've been covering the Jets, I don't know if I've come across quite a situation like this where they trade for a guy. He obviously was okay with the trade because they consulted with him and his agent before the trade to make it, and they make it. And then we find out a few weeks later that he's not happy with his contract. So I did a little research on that, and I went back and checked. In fact, right before we came on the air, there were 22 players in the NFL this offseason who got traded. Out of those 22 guys, 3 of them got new deals, not counting the franchise players like Brian Burns, going to the Giants. 3 guys got new deals. Stephon Diggs going to Houston, Joe Mixon going to Houston, and Jerry Jeudy going to Cleveland. Jeudy got the biggest deal. And so 3 out of 22. So it does happen. And I think that's what Haason Reddick wants. He's looking at all these edge rushers who are making $25 million and north of $25 million. And he says, well, my production over the last 4 years is just as good, if not better than theirs. Why can't I get it? So the question becomes, why did the Jets make the trade if they knew this was the case? It depends who you believe. My understanding is that the Jets were under the impression that he was okay with his contract. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, or maybe Haason Reddick just changed his mind and said, man, this is my chance to try to get a new deal. I'm going to try to grab the brass ring. And so whatever the case may be, he will be in on training camp on time. I can almost guarantee that he will show up on the 23rd. No player wants a $50,000 fine per day, by the way, and that's unwaivable. Jeez. This is not like the old days where the guy would show up and you'd say, oh, okay, don't worry about the fine. You can't waive the fine. And so I think he'll show up now. Will he develop a sore back? Will he develop a hamstring injury? He can't participate. We know these things happen. We've seen these hold-ins occur. That would not surprise me at all. Ultimately, I think they'll be able to come to some sort of middle ground and sweeten his current deal. I would be shocked if the Jets gave him a long-term extension. It wouldn't make any sense. They could have just paid Bryce Huff, $17 million a year. Why go out and pay that kind of money for a guy who's 4 years older? And so I think the Jets will do something to satisfy him, but I don't think it'll be a full-blown extension.
Okay. Well, that's good. At least getting him in the building.
Sorry for the long answer there, but
no, that was great.
Speaking of absences, obviously we got to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Still a pretty big storyline. I think 11 days after the last Jets practice, it's still a big storyline. Is it story being overplayed, underplayed? Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
I couldn't believe they were still talking about it on First Take today. So that one surprised me. Definitely a big story for the first few days. But a week and a half later, it's kind of like, all right, already. But this is a slow time, and so I kind of get it. I've expressed my opinion before on this. I think it's a bad look for Rodgers. I know a lot of Jet fans think it's no big deal. Well, if it were no big deal, they wouldn't call it mandatory, and they would have given him an excuse, but they did not. He was unexcused. And so for those reasons, I thought he should have been there. Now, is this the crime of the century or the crime of the year? No, of course not. But he's the leader of the team. The team follows his lead. He's the face of the franchise. I think it would have set a really good precedent, really good example for him to be there and follow through on this offseason. So I think it's a bad look for Rodgers. It probably won't matter come late July when he starts throwing touchdown passes in practice. But for now, I think it's not great.
Do you think there's any negative rumblings around the players around this time?
We have very limited access to players in the offseason. So we're going to interview them at the podium. And I asked a few players about it, and to a man, they supported Rodgers. They said, if he thinks he needed to be somewhere else and it's that important, then it's important to us too. Basically echoing what Robert Saleh said. So publicly, the players were very supportive. You even saw Sauce Gardner on social media supporting Rodgers. I think if you got players off to the side and gave them some truth serum, there probably would be some guys, I'm not saying I know this, I'm speculating that there probably would be some guys saying, like, why isn't he here? But he's got such command over the locker room and they respect him so much that I don't think anyone would publicly question him. But he'll probably come in on July 24th when we talk to him next and give it a reason why he wasn't there, why he needed to travel across the other side of the world to do what he needed to do, and give his reason for it. It'll be a story then because we haven't talked to him since then, unless he decides to do a podcast between now and then, which is always possible. But with him, you never know. But definitely a story for sure, probably overplayed at this point, but, it's newsworthy when it happened.
Obviously, Rodgers is always going to be at the forefront. He's a lightning rod for attention, and especially in this city, in this market, there's always going to be a lot of attention on him. But when you guys do get to camp in a month or so and things start to get rolling, what are you most interested to watch, Rodgers aside? Just, is there any maybe position battle or a guy that may be on the roster bubble that nobody's talking about that you're kind of interested to see how things play out and shake out in camp?
Really interested to see the wide receiver and running back groups. I think it's an area that the depth is a little bit of a concern in both areas. I mean, running back, because it's so young. I mean, Breece Hall, look, the Jets I think he's one of the best backs in the league, so they're very incapable hands there. But behind him, usually have that veteran presence, and they don't right now. I thought Braylon Allen looked great in OTAs, running around with shorts and a t-shirt on. We'll see when the pads go on. So I want to see how that stacks out with all the young guys. And then a wide receiver, we're going to be watching Mike Williams. How long is he going to be out? I think he'll probably come back somewhere in mid to late August and start practicing again and be ready for the opener. Who fills the gap? Who fills that void? Is it going to be Alan Lazard? Can he get his act together after last year's, disappointing year? What about Malachi Corley? Honestly, didn't do much in OTAs. Didn't really jump out at me in any way. I think he's going to have a learning curve as he develops into more of a sophisticated route runner. It comes from Western Kentucky. They didn't ask him to do a lot there. They're going to ask him to do a lot here in terms of route running. So that's going to take a little time. Xavier Gibson got a lot of run with the ones in the spring. So I think he could make another step. So I'm really curious to see wide receiver, how those, we know who the first two are going to be, but what about 3 through 6? Who are those guys going to be? And also, like I said, the running backs. Those will be some areas to watch.
Do you see the Jets potentially maybe you talked about the relative inexperience of the running back room, and I know they bought in Tariq Cohen, but it feels like that's more as in a special teams kind of role. Do you foresee them maybe adding another veteran body into that room to compete in camp, or is this probably what you see is what you get?
I could see them doing something like that. I don't think that's their preference right now. Look, it worked out badly last year when they did that.
Sure did.
They brought in Dalvin Cook. Not only did they bring him in, but they overpaid him, giving him $7 million and just didn't use him. It was. I really think they want to see these young guys develop with Braylon Allen and Izzy Abanikanda. What's he going to be this year? I thought he was a little bit of a disappointment last year. This is a big year for him. He could be a roster bubble guy if he doesn't improve in certain areas. So could they, if it's mid-August and these rookies and their heads are swimming because they're struggling to grasp the playbook, could they bring in a veteran? Sure, but I don't think that's their plan right now.
Okay.
Rich, the Jets spent a lot of money, a lot of draft capital, fortifying and reworking, so to speak, that offensive line. More specifically, the bookends with Tyrone Smith and Morgan Moses, and then drafting Ali Fashanu. Do you think that they've done enough and have enough, I guess, insurance with their depth pieces they have in place now to protect Rodgers?
Another interior player. I'm not sure why Connor McGovern hasn't been signed back.
Yep.
I thought he would be a good insurance policy at center. Obviously, they like Wes Schweitzer as the backup center. They also have Xavier Newman, who could be a backup center. So, like Saleh said, you always need to have 3 guys who can play center on your roster. You're 53. And so they do now. So something tells me that they're probably content with what they have. Obviously, at tackle, they have enough depth there. They got the 2 starters, Smith and Moses. And then they got the backups, Carter Warren and Olu Fashanu. So they got 4 tackles on the roster. Max Mitchell could be a bubble guy. This could be a challenge for him to make the roster this summer. You wish he had more position flex. And I think he's played some guard in training camp in the past, but he is not a natural guard. It would be great if they could cross-train one of those guys to become like a guard/tackle. That would help with their game day roster construction. So I think they're probably pretty content with the way things are going right now on the line. They have Schweitzer. They have who's a key backup for them. Personally, I think they probably need another interior guy. Let me just look at my depth chart real quick and see. And Newman. They got Glazer. And so, they have some backup. Joe Tippmann is a guy we haven't talked about a lot this offseason because it's all been focused on the new players and the tackles. But huge year for Joe Tippmann. A lot of pressure on him. He's surrounded by a lot of experienced guys. He's like the young pup in the middle. And he showed some real promise last year, but now he's got to step it up to another level now.
Yeah, staying healthy is going to be key across the board, I really feel like.
Absolutely.
Yes. Switching gears a little bit, going back to a little bit more of a personal question. As Matt alluded to before, you've been covering the Jets for about 30 years, 3 decades. I think I listened to an interview once. Did you really only miss like 2 or 3, a handful of games?
Yeah, that's true. But COVID, not counting COVID, which is we
Yes,
didn't
correct.
travel. ESPN didn't travel its reporters during COVID, so I missed those road games that year. And it was like an out of body experience missing those games and watching on TV at home, and then monitoring the Zoom press conferences afterwards was like something we never want to experience again. But other than that year, I missed a game in '97. I missed a game in and I know this, I got really sick. It was the day Eli Manning's streak came to an end. What was
Oh,
that?
wow.
2017, I think. I
20,
think
yeah,
Josh McCown
Yeah.
was the quarterback for the
yeah.
Jets. And they actually beat the Chiefs at home. The Jets played great on offense that game and beat the Chiefs at home. And I was ill. I just had a bad case of the flu and could not make that game or the week after in Denver. That's how sick I was. I missed 2 games in a row. So for illness and family related reasons, yeah, I probably missed like 4 games in
Wow.
35 years. And my streak came to an end. I had a streak of like 200 something straight games that came to an end on the same day that Eli Manning's streak came to an end. Of course, Eli's was a much bigger story.
Depends who you talk to.
as well as it should have been as well.
The Iron Man of the Jets beat.
Yeah.
Obviously,
A lot of games.
you're a guy who's seen it all, been there for the highs, but a lot of lows. Obviously, is there what if you were? I don't even know how you'd begin to do it, but if you were going to maybe rate the one or two biggest stories or the most surreal things that you kind of recall covering in your time in the beat, does anything kind of stick out above over anything else?
It's a really good question. I certainly think the Rodgers trade would be ranked really, really high. I mean, probably one or two. I think the day Belichick resigned, I was sitting right there. I was at that press conference. I think that would be up there. I think the day they hired Bill Parcells would be another, and that came over like it was staggered a little with Parcells. It wasn't one moment because I don't know if you guys are too young. I don't know if you recall, they couldn't hire him right away because the Patriots wouldn't let him out of it. So there's this whole big to-do legal thing with compensation. But I think as an entirety, like hiring Parcells would be up there with the Belichick. And of course, the Brett Favre trade. I mean, we tend to forget about that now, but that was massive at the time.
Yeah.
I remember the first practice at Hofstra. This was about 2 or 3 days after the actual trade, and they were practicing at Hofstra. There's about 10,000 people there on a Sunday, where normally they would get about 2,000. And I just watched Favre. He was the last guy out on the field, and I just watched him warm up, and the crowd was going nuts. And I just kept saying to myself, I can't believe Brett Favre is on the Jets. And that was an interesting year. And I also think the day Geno Smith got punched by IK and Impali.
It always comes up.
Yeah, that not because we witnessed it, live or anything like that, but the fallout was so swift. And I mean, like within a half hour, there were news trucks like driving up one Jets drive, like in the little grass area outside the press room was just filled with, it looked like the lawn of the White House because there was one reporter after another doing stand-ups on a quarterback who got punched in the face by a teammate. And there was like not only sports people, like news crews were out there. It was a really big story. And I'll never forget when Todd Bowles came in to the press room, impromptu, unannounced, and everyone said, get in the press room. Todd's coming in. He's got something to say. And I remember Brian Costello, my colleague from the New York Post, said to Todd, should I use my tape recorder for this? And Todd, it's kind of like in his very deadpan way, he's like, oh, yeah, you're going to want to record this.
You want to hear this.
Yeah. And he announced that Geno got punched and had a broken jaw. So that was a pretty memorable day as well.
Only the Jets.
Yeah. I had a feeling that the Belichick and the Belichick resigning one day after taking the job would be up there, and you could attest to it better than anybody how much just kind of doing this job has changed over the years. Obviously, there was no social media, no Twitter or anything like that. I often wonder, like, how Jets Twitter would have reacted in that moment. Like everybody either tuning in or logging on to kind of see the reaction. And then at that point, just being heartbroken and finding out that that was happening. I often wondered how that would unfold if there were social media. I think it would break the internet.
Yeah, there were some other, that, like I remember distinctly reporting, because Parcells retired, the day before, which, was a little bit of a surprise, but not a total shock. And so I just was talking to some sources in the building that night, and I just was hearing things that, you don't normally hear. I mean, I was expecting, oh yeah, Bill is fired up to take over. But I didn't hear that. And I used the story. I wrote a story in the Daily News that said that, and I know they used the quote on the back page from an anonymous source. It said Belichick is, quote, uneasy about taking over for Parcells. Now, I mean, I only got a tiny bit of the story. I did not think uneasy would turn into I'm out of here,
Right.
So I mean, had that been, that could have played out much differently had we been in a social media world. I remember the day of the Keyshawn Johnson trade to Tampa, which was massive. We broke that story at the Daily News, and I remember finding that out at 2:00 in the afternoon, having it confirmed and everything. The story was locked down at 2 p.m. And in those days, the internet was not used by newspapers for breaking stories. We decided to hold it, till the next morning in the back page of the Daily News, which would be utterly insane now because that story would have been posted at 5 after 2.
Yeah.
And we held it till the next morning, and no one found out about it. We actually held the story, the scoop held until the next morning. People woke up and saw their Daily News that Keyshawn was getting traded to Tampa. That, stuff like that stopped happening 15, almost 20 years ago. So the entire way we cover the beat has changed a lot.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. That's a good story.
Yeah, that's those things that doesn't happen anymore. Now, if there's a big story, 2 minutes later, everyone has it. So
That's 10 minutes later, another
the
story
world we
happens.
live in now. It has its pluses and it has its minuses. So I just got a text from a long time as we're speaking here. Remember Mike Hickey, who used to be the Jets? He used to run the Jets draft for the 1970s and 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, we've kept in touch. He just texted me something funny, but I won't repeat it on here. But
breaking news.
Yeah,
No.
occasionally you hear he was like the Jets GM, back in the Joe Walton days. But anyway, I digress.
How would you compare this Jets team, this Jets roster, coaching staff, just the vibe around the team to some of the past teams you've covered?
I think their starting 22 is probably the best they've had since the last playoff team in 2010. I really like the starting 22. I have some concerns about the depth, which I alluded to at the beginning with running back and wide receiver, and even on defense a little bit at linebacker. I don't think the defensive line depth is quite as good as it used to be. It's still good though. But the starting 22, I mean, it's good. I mean, it's really good. They don't. If Rodgers stays healthy for most of these games, I think the Jets will have a really good chance. My concerns are not so much the personnel with the 22. I think coaching is a concern for me, especially on offense with Nathaniel Hackett. They scored 18 touchdowns on offense last year. I mean, it's absurd. It's won a game. And look, I know they lost the quarterback. I totally get that. But one touchdown a week in the NFL is beyond bad. And so that concerns me. And I do know that Rodgers is the de facto offensive coordinator, but yet there's going to be some coaching involved. And so that's a concern for me, that whole dynamic with Hackett. And honestly, my jury's still out on Robert Saleh. He's been here for 3 years. I still have questions about his ability to lead this team. I'm not saying he can't do it. We just haven't seen it yet. Now, to be fair, he hasn't had a quarterback for the entire season. I mean, Zach Wilson was a disaster, and he never got a chance to coach Rodgers except for 4 plays. And so big year for Robert, obviously. And so that's a big question to me. So I think I'm very curious to see how the team is led and coached this year. And I'm always a little wary of a team that relies so heavily on one player. I mean, it's
Rarely works
the
out.
universe still revolves around number 8. And yes, they might be a little better equipped to survive a major injury at that position, but still, he's the team. And, you always have to be a little concerned about that.
How do you see 2024 playing out?
Well, I mean, I think the AFC East is wide open. I think the Jets can be in contention for it. Like I said, really like the starting 22. Thought Joe Douglas did a good job this offseason. Got to get lucky. I mean, these offensive line injuries have to stop, right? I mean, doesn't the law of averages have to even out at some point and they stay healthy? That's why I thought drafting Fashanu was a great, I was totally in favor of that. I didn't like this whole Brock Bowers thing.
Right.
And so I thought they made the right call there. I have the Jets at about 9 or 10 wins right now. I know fans are a lot more excited than that. But I just want to see how this plays out a little bit in training camp. There's going to be a learning curve, even for Rodgers. I mean, 40-year-old guy coming off Achilles injury, he's not going to come out and throw for 4 touchdowns and 400 yards against the 49ers. I think they're going to have to rely on their ground game. They're going to have to be smart about how they run this offense. They're going to have to be kind of a defensive-oriented team, I think, early in the year until Rodgers gets his legs under him and they get comfortable with this offense, and they can go from there. So I want to see a lot of Breece Hall early in the year. And then I think Rodgers is going to have to dial back his ego a little bit. As much as he'd like to throw the ball 35 or 40 times a game early in the year, I think it's going to be, all right, let's run the ball. Let's run the ball. Let's play ball control. And then after a month or so, when he's feeling better and back to his old self, then you open things up and you do the Aaron Rodgers things. But it's going to have to be carefully orchestrated. And so I think the Jets, they should at least be in the wild card hunt. And if they stay healthy, maybe more.
Yeah, there was a lot made about the way the kind of schedule was structured, and it's obviously a stacked deck against the Jets coming right out of the gate. Do you kind of like that for the team? Obviously not from a logistical standpoint, but just as kind of a barometer to see where they're at right out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing arguably the first or second best team in the league in the 49ers. So that's going to be a real test. I mean, you knew they were going to play on the road. I had a feel because the Giants had requested to play home on the first weekend because of their 100-year celebration. They're having a big celebration that weekend. So you knew the Jets would be on the road. And of course they give them, the Monday nighter and, the marquee matchup. I work for ESPN. I love it. It's a great matchup for ESPN to start off Monday Night Football. But the rest is an issue early in the year, because they're coming back from the West Coast. Then they got a short week to go to Tennessee, and then they come back, and then they have the short week to face New England at home. So it's going to have to be carefully managed by Saleh, getting the players the proper amount of rest. Now they have all these sports scientists who chime in on that sort of stuff. But I think the schedule itself lends itself to a fast start. They're facing some really young quarterbacks. With Will Levis and, if it's not Brissett, maybe Drake May will be starting by week 3, who knows? And then after that, they face, help me on who they have right after.
JJ McCarthy, Minnesota.
Right.
Or Darnold.
Either Darnold, who obviously doesn't scare anyone, or JJ McCarthy in London. So they have a group of young quarterbacks that this defense could really take advantage of. And it would not shock me if the Jets get up to a 3-1 or 4-1 start.
Awesome.
Love it. Let's hope.
Well, Rich, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you again for hopping on and giving us a few minutes as, like we said, the calm before the storm, a couple weeks here before camp. So we appreciate the time.
No, this is great. I really enjoy it. Appreciate the questions. You guys were obviously up on it. And so, once things get started and we get into real, when the bullets start flying, don't hesitate to give me a call.
Love it.
We'll definitely take you up on that. Enjoy your actual real vacation.
I was just going to say, until then, I'm out.
Exactly right.
Enjoy your vacation, Rich, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Rich.
Take care, guys.
Yep. Bye now.
Bye.